So this video today is going to examine the cerebral cortex, or the cerebrum of the brain, and we're going to be looking at the overall function of it as well as looking at specific regions of this cortex and understanding the type of information that is received and interpreted in that specific location. So first off, what you'll notice is that the cerebrum is the colored portion of this brain right here, and this is the largest part of your brain, and it is pretty much what allows you to read, write, talk, think, communicate. All the higher order processing occurs here, and it also receives all of your sensory information such as visual input, olfactory input, gustatory input, hearing, auditory, equilibrium, as well as touch, somatosensory information. And so throughout this clip, we're going to be highlighting the different regions of the cerebrum associated with receiving all of these sensory messages. So to begin though, let's go ahead and talk about how the cerebrum is organized or divided. And so we're going to start with what we call the frontal lobe. And so keep in mind just some anatomical terms. So right on this side right here is the anterior part of the body, and so this is pretty much the most anterior portion of the brain. And then right here is posterior. Okay, so keep that in mind as we discuss the different functional regions and structural regions. So the most anterior lobe is what we call the frontal lobe. And here, if you just remember the names of your cranial bones that we learned from the skeletal system, you'll be able to apply this knowledge in order to determine the names of the brain lobes. So the frontal lobe is the most anterior lobe, and I'm going to be highlighting that in blue right here. Frontal lobe is divided into different functional regions, and we're going to be discussing those as we go along. But for now, let's look at it in a very general overview. And this is the lobe that is responsible for your abstract thought, decision making, speech production, voluntary motor control, as well as planning, motivation, some aspects of your personality. The next lobe that we're going to be looking at is the temporal lobe. So what are some overall functions of this lobe? This lobe is pretty much important because this is where hearing, smell, language comprehension occurs, as well as some visual and auditory memory, alrighty. Let's look over to the third lobe, and this right here is what we call the parietal lobe. So the parietal lobe is important for somatic sensation, it receives somatosensory information from the body, such as touch, pressure, vibration, temperature information. And it also has some language processing functions, as well as sensory integration functions. The fourth lobe that we're going to be looking at is the occipital lobe. And this occipital lobe is important for visual awareness, as well as visual processing. Right? So these are the four superficial lobes of the cerebrum, but we actually have yet another lobe that is a little bit deeper than these four lobes. And so actually, if you peel this region right here, in between the frontal and the temporal lobe, you will see that right underneath it, we have another lobe that is called the insula. So this right here is what we call the lateral sulcus, separating the temporal lobe from the frontal and the parietal lobes. And so if you peel that open, you'll notice the insula. This is another lobe that is important for taste information, so receives taste input. It also has been shown to play a part in pain, signaling, also involved in consciousness, as well as emotion and empathy. And there you have it. These are the 5 different lobes of the cerebral cortex.